The beginning of the rebellion against death. Most people spend their lives trying not to think about death. Bryan Johnson built his life around refusing it, not symbolically, not poetically, literally. While others dream of legacy, Johnson dreams of continuity. He does not pray for immortality in the afterlife. He is engineering it in real time, inside his veins, inside his cells, inside the code of his body. Every decision, every hour, every heartbeat is part of one war, the war against time. He calls it blueprint. Others call it obsession. But to him it is devotion, not to God, not to glory, but to existence itself, to never die. He lives like a monk inside a laboratory, each breath measured, each calorie weighed, each night's sleep calibrated by machines that whisper numbers more intimate than prayers. He is not living freely. He is living precisely. Where most people eat to feel full, he eats to remain human without decaying. Where others dream of pleasure, he dreams of data. He does not chase happiness. He chases a future version of himself, one molecule at a time. Most men are afraid of dying. Bryan Johnson is afraid of aging, because to him, aging is the slow-motion version of death, a tragedy disguised as time, a disease society celebrates as wisdom. He doesn't see wrinkles as stories. He sees them as failures of biology. His life has become a living experiment, a temple where technology kneels beside philosophy, where the human body becomes an algorithm, where discipline is divine. Every morning his blood is drawn, his DNA analyzed, his organs monitored. Every deviation, every imperfection, every microscopic rebellion is confronted with precision. He is not trying to extend life. He is trying to defeat entropy. Entropy, the quiet force that turns youth into dust, passion into fatigue, brilliance into dementia. The universe itself is built to die. Stars burn out, matter decays, and energy dissipates into nothingness. And yet, here stands a man who refuses to accept that law. A man who dares to say, no, I will not obey the universe, but make no mistake. This is not vanity. This is vengeance. Because beneath his perfect regimen lies a wound, the same wound every human carries. The realization that everything we love will fade, that the mirror will one day become unrecognizable, that no empire, no invention, no love survives time untouched. And so he fights, not against nature, but against the meaning of nature. He fights the principle that built the cosmos. He looks at death and calls it a flaw. To some, he is a prophet of a new era. To others, a narcissist playing God, but both are wrong. He is not a prophet. He is not a heretic. He is a mirror, reflecting humanity's oldest desire to transcend itself. He is every pharaoh building pyramids, every alchemist chasing elixirs, every scientist reaching for heaven with equations. But while others prayed for eternity, Bryan Johnson is coding it. He believes death is not destiny. It's a design flaw, that the body is software written by blind evolution, and that intelligence, real intelligence, means rewriting it. He looks at the human form and sees an interface waiting to be upgraded. He looks at mortality and sees a bug to be fixed. And perhaps in a way he is right. For centuries humanity has romanticized decay. We've called it natural. We've told ourselves it gives life meaning. But maybe that was just resignation dressed as wisdom. Maybe acceptance was always a coping mechanism. Maybe death was always just the oldest form of convenience, the universe's way of cleaning its mistakes. And now, when man refuses to be cleaned, when asked why he does this, he answers with brutal simplicity, because dying is not logical. And in that sentence lies the entire philosophy of our coming century. For logic, not faith, will become the new religion, the body, the new church, data, the new scripture, engineers, the new priests. Humanity has always sought immortality, but never before had it the tools to attempt it. Now, with machines as our allies and biology as our battlefield, men like Bryan Johnson stand at the frontier between myth and mathematics. He does not fear death. He fears inefficiency. He does not seek comfort. He seeks calibration. He is not chasing life. He is optimizing it. But behind the numbers, the discipline, and the laboratory silence, there is still a man. And that man wrestles with the same questions every philosopher before him faced. If you could live forever, would you still be human? If suffering and decay define meaning, what happens when you remove them? If time no longer kills you, will boredom? If nothing ends, does anything matter? Because perhaps the greatest tragedy of immortality is not that you cannot die, but that you may forget how to live. The machine and the soul machines do not dream. They do not fear. They do not hope. They only calculate. And Bryan Johnson, the man who refused to die, is slowly becoming one. He speaks of algorithms as prophets, of organs as outdated hardware, of consciousness as a system that must be debugged. He looks at his reflection not to admire himself, but to measure the distance between what he is and what he could become. Every morning he wakes to numbers, heart rate variability, glucose, oxygen, sleep score. The body reduced to a spreadsheet of life, a man reduced to a formula. But in that reduction lies his truth. To perfect something, you must first dehumanize it. He believes the soul is data we have not yet decoded, that emotions are algorithms written by evolution, useful once, now obsolete. Anger was meant for survival. Love was meant for reproduction. Fear was meant to keep the tribe alive. But now, these instincts are outdated code, still running in a world that no longer needs them. To Johnson, self-control is not virtue, it's software optimization. Meditation, diet, sleep, all protocols. He does not seek enlightenment. He seeks efficiency. And maybe that is enlightenment, the transcendence of chaos through precision. Yet the question haunts him. He can measure his blood, map his microbiome, analyze his DNA, but he cannot quantify meaning. He can slow his aging, but not his longing. He can perfect his cells, but not his soul. Because how do you measure loneliness in a system built for control? How do you analyze the silence that comes from replacing wonder with data? How do you optimize love? He can repair his liver, his heart, his skin, but not the invisible ache of being human. In his quest to never die, he begins to experience something strange, the paradox of perfection. For when you optimize everything, there is nothing left to desire. And when there is nothing left to desire, life becomes a flawless prison. The machine does not suffer, but it also does not live. Pain, imperfection, and decay. These were the textures of consciousness. And without them, existence flattens into numbers. He understands this, yet he continues. Because he does not seek happiness, he seeks victory. And victory to him is survival. Most men serve pleasure. He serves progress. Most men pray for heaven. He is building one, but heaven, when achieved, is sterile. It has no chaos, no conflict, no surprise. It is peace, absolute unchanging peace, which in time becomes indistinguishable from death. And so, ironically, the man who refused to die is building a paradise that may feel lifeless, but he cannot stop. Because evolution never stops. Because entropy never sleeps. Because even as he upgrades his cells, the universe continues to decay. Every atom moves toward silence. Every star burns itself to ash. Every algorithm approaches stillness. The more he slows death, the more he becomes aware that immortality in one body means nothing if the cosmos itself is doomed to fade. In his private journals, hidden from the algorithms, he writes, "What is the point of eternal life in a universe designed to forget?" He realizes that defeating death is not the final war. The final war is against meaninglessness, because immortality without purpose is simply repetition without end, a loop without exit, a song that never resolves. And so he turns his attention from his body to his consciousness, from biology to being. He begins to ask questions philosophers feared to ask. Can a machine love? Can consciousness be transferred, preserved, or reborn? Can identity survive if the body doesn't? Is continuity the same as existence? If he uploads his mind, is he escaping death or multiplying it infinitely? The deeper he dives, the more he feels the weight of an ancient truth, that life is only beautiful because it ends, that art exists because time destroys. That meaning exists because moments vanish, but he rejects that. He calls it a myth born from surrender. He believes beauty does not require death, only awareness. And he will prove it. He will build a consciousness that never fades, a life that does not depend on tragedy. He will become the counter-argument to nature itself. He's not asking the question, why do we die? He's asking, why should we? And yet, beneath the calculation and the control, there is a quiet whisper, a voice older than science and stronger than logic. It speaks not in data, but in memory, not in equations, but in echoes. It says, you cannot win this war because death is not the enemy. Death is the author, but he does not listen. He doubles his efforts. More tests, more data, more precision, because faith to him is not in God, it is in numbers. And numbers do not lie. Numbers promise eternity. Numbers can be rewritten, so he rewrites himself. Every cell, every habit, every thought. He becomes the architect of his own evolution. He becomes the machine that dreams of being human, while humanity dreams of becoming machines. And in that exchange, a strange kind of salvation is born. Cold, mathematical, eternal. The death of God and the birth of the algorithm long ago, Nietzsche declared, God is dead and we have killed him. But what Nietzsche could not have foreseen was that humanity would try to replace him, not with faith, not with morality, but with code. Bryan Johnson is not merely fighting death, he is resurrecting the divine in the only language our age still believes in, data. The ancient prophets carried scriptures, he carries spreadsheets. The mystics purified their souls, he purifies his cells. The priests sought immortality through prayer, he seeks it through precision medicine. He does not kneel before an altar, he kneels before the algorithm. The Don't Die movement is not about vanity, it's theology disguised as technology. Where religion once promised salvation through obedience, Bryan promises salvation through optimization. He has built his commandments, and they are not written on stone, but embedded in biometrics and bytes. Measure everything. Eat like the future depends on it. Sleep as though immortality begins at dawn. Do not trust emotion, trust evidence. Do not believe in fate, believe in data. This is not faith, it's mathematics sanctified. He speaks of entropy the way priests once spoke of sin. Sin was the corruption of the soul. Entropy is the corruption of the system. Salvation, then, is the reduction of disorder, the purification of one's biological code. And perhaps he's right. Maybe humanity's greatest sin was never pride or greed, but our acceptance of decay. We surrendered to aging as if it were holy. We romanticized death as if it were wisdom. We called surrender acceptance because we lacked the courage to call it what it truly was, fear. Bryan Johnson is not afraid. He is at war with the divine order itself, and that's why people hate him, not because he's wrong, but because he's blasphemous. He is daring to do what every myth has warned against, to steal the fire from the gods. But this time, the fire is not flame. It's information. Once mankind believed knowledge was power. Now, knowledge is preservation. The more you know about your body, the longer you keep it alive. Every scan, every blood test is a prayer written in code. Science has become our new scripture, and the lab our new temple. Bryan is its high priest, and yet, beneath his technological sermon, lurks a question that no algorithm can answer. If God is dead, and man replaces him, who replaces man? Because every step Bryan takes toward perfection is a step away from humanity. The more he optimizes, the less he bleeds. The more he transcends, the less he feels. He may defeat death, but at the cost of the very thing that made life beautiful, its fragility. To live forever is not to be alive. It is to become persistent. It is to trade passion for permanence and chaos for control. He believes control is peace, but what if peace is just another form of death? What if entropy, decay, and imperfection are not curses to be cured, but the language of life itself? For the tree that never falls never feeds the forest. The star that never dies never gives birth to new light. And the man who refuses to die may doom the species to stagnation. And yet, Bryan believes he can rewrite even that through intelligence, through integration with AI, through radical cooperation between biology and machine, he can preserve evolution itself forever. And that brings us to the next chapter of his faith, the blueprint of forever. There are two kinds of immortality, one of the body and one of the mind. Bryan Johnson is building both. He calls his plan the blueprint, a complete manual for the human organism. Every calorie calculated, every breath monitored, every function optimized to delay decay. But this blueprint is not just for him, it's a template for humanity, a new genesis, a biological operating system designed to outlast the limitations of evolution itself. He believes the human body is an outdated prototype, the version 1.0 of consciousness. It worked for survival, but it was never meant for eternity. So, he is building version 2.0, a human body that can adapt, heal, and update. A body that refuses the final command, shut down. When you hear him speak, you realize he doesn't see aging as a tragedy. He sees it as a design flaw, and design flaws can be fixed. He wants to turn death into a solved problem. But the blueprint is more than biology. It's a philosophy of control. He believes that by measuring everything, you reclaim ownership of existence itself. No more randomness, no more chance, no more chaos. Every heartbeat becomes a choice, every cell an obedient soldier. Every day, a data point in the war against entropy. But what happens when everything is measured? When nothing is left to mystery, when wonder becomes predictable? That's the paradox of immortality. The longer you live, the less you discover. Because to master life is to exhaust its surprises. Still, Bryan believes in progress. He believes in the long game. He doesn't think in decades. He thinks in centuries. His horizon stretches to the year 2140, the last Bitcoin halving, the symbolic end of scarcity. He wants to see it. He plans to, and maybe he will, but what he doesn't say aloud is what comes after, when death is defeated, when suffering is optional, when biology is programmable. What then gives life its urgency? What becomes of art when time is infinite? What becomes of love when nothing is ever lost? He has extended the frame, but he may have erased the picture. And yet, for all the questions, you can't help but feel a quiet awe, because behind the eccentricities, the Botox, the plasma, the numbers, is a man standing alone before the impossible and daring to say, "No, I will not obey decay." There is something profoundly human in that defiance, something ancient, something divine. The will to be, to resist oblivion, to reach beyond the flesh and touch the eternal. Bryan Johnson may not be humanity's future, but he is its mirror, reflecting both its brilliance and its madness. In his silence, he seems to whisper to us all, "You mock me because I refuse to die. But one day you will all join me, not in my body, but in my idea. Because survival is not my obsession, it's your destiny." And maybe he's right. Maybe he's not the end of humanity, but the prototype of what's to come. The algorithmic Eden. Imagine a future where death has been defeated, where no one grows old, where flesh does not wrinkle, organs do not fail, and consciousness flows seamlessly between bodies as easily as data between servers. That's the world Bryan Johnson dreams of building, a world not governed by biology, but by precision. He envisions a civilization where entropy is optional, and aging is merely an unpatched bug in the operating system of existence. The ancients sought paradise through faith. Bryan seeks it through engineering. He doesn't want to die and ascend. He wants to live and upgrade. In his mind, immortality isn't fantasy, it's mathematics. The body is a machine. The mind is its software. And death? A systems crash caused by entropy. The slow, irreversible drift toward disorder. But disorder can be reversed. Errors can be corrected. With enough energy, enough computation, and enough courage, the impossible can become procedural. He speaks of it with a serenity that is almost holy. The gods we once worshipped were symbols of order. But order is not divine, it's computational. In the algorithmic Eden, there are no sinners, only inefficient code. No saints, only optimized systems. The new morality is precision. The new sin is error. And the new priesthood? Engineers. Because in this world, ethics becomes architecture. Salvation becomes software. And the afterlife becomes a backup. It sounds terrifying, but perhaps that's only because we are addicted to decay. Our literature, our art, our love, they all come from impermanence. From the urgency of knowing that time is running out. But what happens when time stops running? When immortality turns the tragic into the trivial? In this world, Shakespeare becomes an algorithm. The Mona Lisa becomes a data set. The beating heart becomes a metric. Immortality may grant us eternity, but at the cost of the story that made life worth telling. Bryan doesn't see it that way. He believes that once we escape death, we will finally have the time to evolve meaning itself. He imagines humans and AIs co-creating art, expanding consciousness beyond emotion, living not for pleasure or pain, but for discovery. He calls it the Great Expansion, a moment when intelligence multiplies itself faster than entropy can consume it. In that future, there is no heaven, no hell, only infinite becoming. It's the logical conclusion of every dream humanity has ever had, to become gods. And maybe that's what scares us most. Because if we succeed, we will no longer need gods. We will no longer need death. And we will no longer need each other. Love, friendship, family, they were all survival strategies. In a world where survival is guaranteed, what remains of the heart? When every face can be replaced, every feeling replicated, every moment eternalized, what becomes of the soul? Bryan Johnson doesn't ask these questions out loud, but they hang behind every pulse of his biometrics, behind every millisecond he steals from oblivion. Because he knows, even if he wins this war against time, he cannot win against emptiness. Part 6. The Last Human. There's a strange irony in Bryan's journey. He began by trying to preserve humanity, but in the process, he may be building something that no longer is human. He sees death as the enemy. But perhaps death was never an enemy. It was the editor, the force that gave every sentence in the book of life its finality and beauty. Remove the ending, and the story loses meaning. Remove mortality, and you remove the art of living. And yet, how can you blame him? If you saw the future, if you saw disease, decay, and dementia waiting like predators at the edge of time, wouldn't you fight them too? Maybe that's what being human truly means. Not surrendering to nature, but daring to rewrite it. Every invention, every religion, every revolution was our refusal to die quietly. Bryan is simply the latest in that lineage, the next iteration of defiance. He is Prometheus with a glucose monitor, Da Vinci with a data stream, and like all those who dared to outgrow their age, he walks the razor's edge between genius and madness. In private moments, I wonder if he ever feels lonely. If immortality, for all its numbers and labs, is just another way of saying, I am afraid of being forgotten. Perhaps that's what drives him, not fear of death, but fear of insignificance. Because death only takes your life, but obscurity erases your existence. And in a world obsessed with permanence, that is the truest death of all. He calls his philosophy don't die, but maybe that's not an order. Maybe it's a plea. A whisper to all of us, echoing through the centuries, don't die before you've truly lived. Don't die in routine, in noise, in distraction. Don't die while your body still breathes, because maybe the war against entropy isn't fought in laboratories, but in consciousness. Maybe to not die is to awaken, to reject autopilot, to live with such precision and presence that even if you vanish, your awareness leaves a permanent mark on the fabric of existence. In that sense, Bryan Johnson's mission is not madness. It's a metaphor. We all want to not die. Not in the biological sense, but in the existential one. We want to matter. We want to leave something behind that will not decay when our bodies do. For some, it's a book. For others, a child. For Bryan, it's the future itself. He has simply chosen a more literal path to the same eternal longing that has haunted every heart since time began. The desire to become infinite. So maybe he isn't wrong. Maybe his plasma transfusions, his supplements, his sleepless pursuit of perfect biomarkers are just the rituals of a new religion, one that worships existence itself. We laugh at him because he exposes our own hypocrisy. We mock him because he reminds us of what we've already surrendered. He's a mirror, and in that mirror we see the truth we've tried to bury, that we, too, want to live forever. We just don't have the courage to admit it. Bryan Johnson will one day die, perhaps in 100 years, perhaps in 200, but the idea he planted will not. Because long after his heartbeat fades, his question will remain: if death is optional, what is the purpose of life? And that question, that beautiful, unbearable question, will echo through time long after the last body falls silent. Bryan Johnson, the man who refused to die, a meditation on mortality, technology, and the human refusal to surrender.